Good morning from Copenhagen and good afternoon to those joining from Thailand. Welcome to Tniu Fika Talks, where we bring fresh idea over coffee. This episode from Lab to Life explore how science, particularly in longevity medicine and sustainable biotech, is shaping healthier, greener future in both Nordic and Thailand. I'm Kanchana from TNIU Denmark. I will be the moderator for today's session. First, we have together with us here today Dr. Roberto de Maria, the Chief Scientific Officer of BioHalo, who is tackling one of our biggest environmental challenges by creating sustainable product from biology. Dr. Roberto, could you introduce yourself briefly and also maybe about the current project you are working on?
Yeah, gladly. Thank you for the kind introduction and for inviting me here. As said, I'm CSO at BioHalo, which is a startup company spin out of the Danish Technical University. And our main focus and core technology is the production of sustainable biopolymers and fine chemicals using synthetic biology. My background is biochemistry and molecular biology. And I achieved my PhD at the Tniu Technical University a few years ago, and since then I've been working in BioHalo.
Well, if we're talking about BioHalo, what is the current maybe project that BioHaro is currently working on right now that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, sure. So we are producing biological polymers that contains fluorine modifications, and this particular type of modifications give high performance to the materials, and we are developing the products to be substitutes for perfluorinated substances that are right now recognized as a big threat to both human health and environmental sustainability. So our processes are bio-based, so fermentation-based, which are much more sustainable, so for several reasons compared to traditional chemical processes.
Can you give us maybe more of an example of a product that we might use in everyday that uh, likely full of, as we know, PFAS or forever chemicals?
Yes, exactly. So a very famous example of PFAS is Teflon, which is used for covering the pans for non-sticky coatings, but it's also in Gore-Tex for textile that makes your raincoats waterproof. And what's actually very interesting about PFAS is that they are a bit everywhere in our life, even though we don't know. Some striking example is, for example, the shaving blades are coated with this PFAS materials to make a smoother feeling when you shave against your skin. Or a lot of biomedical devices are coated and covered with these materials to prevent interaction with the human body.
That is very like I never thought of the shaving blade to be covered with PFAS. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And can you give us an example of like a common product or like how your team is building a bio-based solution to replace it with something safe and then sustainable?
Yeah, so what we are aiming at right now is the development of coatings for electronic devices. So semiconductors and electronic devices are usually covered with the thin layer of PFAS that allows them to protect them from moisture and dust. But it also makes much more challenging the recycling of these materials. Our biopolymers can give very similar protective features than PFAS, but it's a biodegradable polymer. So when the semiconductor reach the end of life, the coating it's naturally degraded, and the materials that are underneath are easily to be separated.
Well, if we're talking about okay, biograded material that using in a factory, we
Mm-hmm.
as a PFAS material, we know that PFAS lasts longer as it's
Mm-hmm.
aka forever chemical. But how biograded the material, for example, using in manufacturing or bigger scale, is it like the shelf life, or how it lasts long as the same as PFAS? I mean, in the shelf life
Well,
of yeah.
yeah, especially manufacturing, that is very interesting because PFAS are used in several processes in manufacturing, but they are usually one single-use materials. So, for example, a classic example that we studied is the production of wind blades for turbines. These are usually composite fibers or aluminum blades that are casted basically in giant molds. And to help the release of the blade once the material has been casted, the molds are usually covered with a thin layer of Teflon. This thin layer, though, it's like single use. It's used once, and then the mold is being cleaned, removed, and then a new layer, fresh layer, is being used. So the longevity of this material for specific applications is actually not a feature that is important in the manufacturing process.
I see. And because the audience joining us today is not just researcher, but also from SME, from bio
Yeah.
packaging company from Thailand as well. I would want to shape a little bit on about like the cost of production. I mean, you are starting a company, like a startup for
Yeah.
bio material, but how about the cost to compete with the PFAS or like
Mhm.
forever chemical? How is that in terms of perspective of cost?
Yeah, so it is clear for us that PFAS are produced to very high levels, and some of them are extremely cheap. And competing with bulk chemicals against chemical industry is very difficult, and there's been a lot of examples of these. So what we are looking at is actually applications where these materials have a very high price point because they're used in very low quantities for very specific high performance applications. And in these specific markets and applications, PFAS are used because they are the materials that is available and they are known, but often they don't need to perform, how would you say, you don't need to perform to the max potential of these PFAS, but they still have a pretty high price tag. So these are the first application where we want to enter the market in order to have enough economics to drive our productions and improve it further in order to grow up our scale and eventually use economy scale to be cost competitive. For example, some of the additives, PFAS that are electronic coatings, range from the price between $900 and $1,500 per kilo.
See.
So these can also be quite expensive materials, with the caveat that they are usually used at very little quantities. So those are the type of first products that we're trying to replace, where we can definitely be cost competitive. And going from there, we're going to expand more our production facilities and expand our portfolio to the point where we can drive costs down by economy of scale.
I see. I hope that the answer could drive some idea for SME in Thailand in terms of biotechnology packaging. And if we are looking ahead, what news or emerging field of sustainable bioscience are you more excited about and that could completely change a major industry in the coming years?
Yeah. So from what I could see and my perspective, especially in the Copenhagen bubble, what I see a lot potential in the biotech industry is firstly food additives and fragrances. That's for sure a big field where there is actually, it's one of those examples where the biotech industry has a clear leverage and angle, because to make an example, some specific anti-malarial drugs like artemisinin are produced by flowers, and they're currently being extracted to produce medicines. This requires a huge amount of land use because these compounds are present in very small quantities in the flowers. With biotech, we can have an industrial scale production of these compounds, which means that we use much less land and in terms of much less energy and water, and we can produce a very important compound, like such an anti-malarial drug, to scale without competing directly for land use for food, for example. Another very interesting area that is being developed is natural dyes. So we know that the textile industry has a pretty big impact in terms of environmental pollution. And this is mainly due to the fact that the staining and dyeing of the textile, it's a quite nasty process. And there are a lot of companies that are developing bio-based natural dyes that can also fix to the textile much better than the synthetic ones. And then they have a double, let's say, a double angle of having a sustainable product that is produced using renewable sources, but also the process of attaching the dye to the fabric is it requires much less chemicals, and the process is much easier to control that way.
Well, thank you for that. That's a very, how to say, can shift our perspective on how things around us can really, influence in a more greener way in what we use, what we consume. And if we look in terms of a consumer perspective, not just researcher and a scientist, in a consumer perspective, what in your view that you could think we can contribute to a better green world in terms of consumer?
Well, consumer behavior is of course very important to drive the change and the shift. What we've seen so far is that to be able to change a market, you need to be cost competitive. There's no way around. Like the sustainable and green labels are nice, but when a product costs double from the supermarket to the industrial application, the consumers will likely not want to use that product because it's just too expensive. So from one side, of course, if you can afford it and buy greener products, that's always good because you create a market for those products. But I think political pressure to international and local stages, it's also very important because a lot of non-sustainable products that we use are so cheap because they're heavily subsidized. And so we need to have a more cultural shift and political change to allow for these new technologies that are more sustainable to thrive.
Yes, thank you for that. That's another like insightful perspective on consumer good and behavior. And let's shift also a little bit back to the SME and startup. I mean, how can SME and startup effectively integrate a circular economy principle into their business model, or even leveraging biotechnology, bio-based solution? Like, what are the bigger hurdles in terms of cost, scalability, or performance compared to a traditional chemical products?
Well, the very first hurdle is just incumbency. We as a humans been developing biochemical and chemical processes for the last century. So the chemical industry is quite advanced technological wise, and biotech companies and in general new technologies struggle with the fact that they are very new, right? So they don't have that technology level where your efficiency are always at 99%. So a lot of companies that we see failing are aiming too high, are aiming to replace a product that has been developed and optimized for the past 80 years and try to be cost competitive with a technology that is maybe 2 to 5 years old. The trick here is really to find the leverages, to find the markets and the applications where there is a need for better processes, because most of the processes we are using are optimized, but they're not optimal. And so there are places in the value chain where biotech can really bring an added value, and that's where we should first focus so that we can develop the technology for biotech to the point where we can be cost competitive also to the secondary and tertiary products. I'm thinking about bioplastics, for example. It's very difficult to be cost competitive with the petrochemical industry that has a lot of subsidies, but also incredible efficiencies, a very efficient process. While there are a lot of other processes where chemists had to make compromises because they are limited. The chemistry field has some limitations that the biology, for example, could overcome. And integrating the two together, I think, is the way to go. So finding a process where the good things of the chemical processes are maintained and the weaknesses are replaced by biochemistry.
I see. And shedding some light to SME and startup, and how can they like effectively integrate biotechnology that without require massive initial investment?
I think the best way forward is to actually find partners. One of the things we struggle a lot in BioHalo is that we are a small startup. We have a very core expertise in biotech. And we cannot reach market alone just with our knowledge. We need to rely on partners that are experts in their field, and they know how our products can be useful and can be applied. So what we see, for example, and we struggle a lot, was to find partners that were able to cope with both fermentation and biological performances and chemical industry. Because the two worlds, not very rarely they talk together, but actually there's a lot of potential for synergies there. So find partners and collaborators that are experts outside your field of expertise and build collaborations and synergies there.
Thank you for that. That's, I think, give another idea and then some inspiration for SME and the company in Thailand who looking to promote more of a biotechnology or advancing technology and giving that talking about collaboration and synergy. You just came to Thailand in June, right? For the collaboration between university and research institution in Thailand. And when you were in Thailand, Thailand is rich in agriculture biomass, like, for example, cassava or sugarcane bagasse, even food waste. How do you see these resources fitting into the bioeconomy?
So actually, I think Thailand was a very inspiring trip for me. It was my first time in Thailand, and I had the opportunity to visit 3 different universities and also talk with a lot of industrial partners or potential future partners. I was very surprised how is, especially in the terms, as you said, of sugarcane, molasses, and alternative sources. So that's actually the very first technology development. Can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you, but video is was paused a
Okay,
little
sorry.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know if I froze completely. No, one thing that I was very surprised is how readily available are secondary feedstocks and carbon sources, and that's definitely a great potential. We saw that in Brazil, for example, with the bioethanol production, that became such a huge industry just by the fact that there were raw resources there ready to be harnessed. And I think Thailand has a very good mix of natural resources, but also expertise to leverages those resources into new technologies. So that's actually very interesting. It was very interesting for me to see.
Thank you for that. And one last question from me. What would a truly circular value chain between Thailand and Denmark look like from, for example, farm waste to finished product that come into your mind?
So what I see, for example, as to continue with the discussion before, the raw material sources. Like we are based in Denmark. It's a small country, doesn't have great access to resources for secondary feedstocks. So for many production processes that we are envisioning for the future, I see great potential into doing the
Hello.
production close to the source of.
This is the third floor, right? Well, take the elevator. Okay.
Yeah, I see a lot of potential in converting these raw resources closer to the source of it. And also for R&D and research activities, I think there's a great potential for collaborations where there's a lot of knowledge and expertise that has been generated in Thai universities and study programs. And in Europe and Western countries, we have also a long legacy history of research. And I think these two can really combine together very well.
Yes, thank you for that sharing. And I think many of the companies and SME and also researchers who are joining us today have already like the idea of the future collaboration on how can Thailand and Denmark moving forward in terms of better uh, to merge biotechnology between these two countries. And I think now the time has reached that we now welcome the questions from Dr. Alberto, whether you are curious about biotech role in consumer goods, industrial processes, or environmental protections. Now is your chance to use our expertise. I think we have one question coming in the chat, if I'm not wrong. The question is, have you explored opportunity for collaboration with countries in Southeast Asia, such as Thailand, especially in area like sustainable packaging or agriculture?
Yeah. So thank you very much for the question. It's actually very interesting. One thing that we are been often asked is about the packaging industry. It's definitely a market that we would like to enter in the future. Right now, we struggle to see, let's say, a product that we can deliver that is cost competitive. But we are a small team, so most likely we don't know everything about the packaging world. So if there would be opportunities to talk with people from the industry that can guide us into find the right applications and the right type of products, that would be very interesting. In terms of collaboration with Southeast Asian country, yeah, we've been exploring and looking forward to build new collaborations. This is actually a fairly recent project that we started with my trip to Thailand. We are also been lucky enough to be invited into a program in Japan for startups matchmaking with between big Japanese companies and startups around the world. We've been traveling last year, and we're going to travel again Japan in October to foster collaborations there as well, because it's also a great big market, especially for electronics, so and consumers, especially in the case. In the terms of agriculture, what we see personally as BioHalo is, as I was saying, like the chance of having access to big amount of raw resources that we can upgrade. On a more scientific and academic side, I've seen recently a lot of very interesting work in the combination of biotechnology and agriculture to improve food production processes. Some of them are very exciting and interesting. To mention one, there's a research group in the USA that is developing satellite imaging technology that is using specific markers that bacteria produces that can be detected from satellite images, so that they can use genetic engineered bacteria to give information about the soil and the quality of the crops from the sky. And that's a very futuristic technology in my view, but it sounds very exciting and very interesting.
Yeah, I can see your face that you are very excited about not just you, but also us here and with the audience, that we are looking into the future and what would make us have a better world. And now we have another questions coming. Well, we will welcome a few more questions and we will shift to another questions. What are some of the biggest scientific or engineering challenges currently faced in scaling up bio-based solution to replace? I think this question is, did you already answer that in the session? I think.
No, we touched upon it, but
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting question, and it's the core of biotech development, which is the scale up. Volumes are always very important, and unfortunately, biological systems tend to not behave as we expect them as the scale up goes. So one of the greatest challenges is consistency in one way, so that your products and your process stay consistent as you scale up. And also very importantly, that you have high success rate of your production. One of the things I learned running economic models that is very important is that you need to account for failure rates. And unfortunately, the failure rates of biotech processes tend to be higher than chemical ones. So that's another added cost that you have to take into account. And there are for sure some inherent limitations in biological processes that they cannot be really developed to the point to replace chemical processes. And I'm thinking, for example, a great issue is the mass transfers. So you need to have when you have very big reactors, the transfers of molecules between the biomass and the media and also on becomes more challenging. And chemical processes has less limitations in that sense because they can input more energy to the system to improve the mass transfer, while biological systems don't like too much having too much energies inside.
Okay, I hope that's answered the question for our enthusiastic audience. And another question, this is quite interesting. Thailand has abundant agricultural biomass. Could biohallow technology be adapted to use local Thai feedstock for sustainable polymer production?
Yeah, so that's actually something that we're very interested about, and I would love to have more resources to develop this further. But definitely, so one of the key features of our technology is that our bacterial strain can accept a whole variety of feedstocks, and especially for secondary products from the agriculture, such as cellulose, lignocellulose, or as is mentioned afterwards, also rice straw as feedstock. That could very well be a compatible feedstock for our technology. The question or the problem of the agricultural waste feedstock is again the consistency, especially in polymer production. The most important thing, I would say, even before the titer, is the consistency of the polymer. You want to provide a product that is always the same quality, and unfortunately, waste streams and secondary agricultural waste streams tends to be not very consistent, right? In 1 month you get some type of waste, the other month you get another one. And the challenge there is to build up a technology that can handle with this deviation and provide the very similar product.
Thank you for touching on that. And one last question before we move to the next session is, what RTRL are BioHallow's core technologies currently at? And have any of your innovation reached pilot or demo scale yet?
Yeah, no, we're not there yet. So we are at RTL 6. We are now prototyping our products to find the right application and market, and we are looking now into the possibility of scaling up and see how the production process is performing at scale.
Okay, I hope that's answered all of our curious audience. And thank you, Dr. Maria, for truly inspiring to see how science is being used, not just to prevent harm, but to actively improve our planet.
Thank you very much.
And if any of the audience would like to have a question later on or reach out, we maybe have a time left at the end of the session. Maybe we could catch up on that. And now let's move on to Dr. Morten. Are you here with us?
I'm right here. Hi.
Hi. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Yeah. Let me introduce Dr. Morten a little bit. Dr. Morten is a from University of Copenhagen, and he will share his work on understanding why we age and how we can influence that process. Dr. Morten, to get us started, can you give us a brief overview of your current research?
Yeah, sure. Shall I share slides or how
Yeah,
you
we
want?
will welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have prepared a presentation if that's necessary. Otherwise, we can also just discuss. I mean, I work at University of Copenhagen as an associate professor, where I run the a lab where we try to understand aging. And I can run through a presentation here in the next 20 minutes if that's worthwhile.
Yes, we would welcome, and I think the audience are waiting to hear that also.
Okay, fantastic. Great. Yeah, so thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be here. So my group really focuses on understanding the sort of molecular basis of aging and trying to understand what happens when we grow old, what are the changes in our cells and our microenvironment that affect the aging process? Why do we develop graying of hair? Why do we develop facial wrinkles? And all of the many different phenotypes that occur with age, also pigmentation changes in our skin. And these are, of course, things that happen on the surface, right? But there's a huge amount of other things that happen, not on the surface, but also inside of us, right? So, for example, 40% of us will develop cancer. A lot of us will develop muscle weakness. So this is basically a study where we downloaded a very large amount of biomedical literature, more than 30 million articles. And then we asked the question, what is the phenotypes? What are the characteristics that we see in an aging population? And so, and this is the prevalence of those features. And so the most prevalent feature is graying of hair. So almost everybody develops graying of hair, 99% of everybody. But again, then there's other things that are more serious, cancer. And I've been studying dementia quite a bit. Between 10 and 20% of everybody will develop some type of dementia. And so why should we actually care about aging? And so globally, the population is across the world, they're growing older. So this is the percentage of individuals 65 and older. And each curve here is a different country. The thick curve is the average of the world. And as we can see, by the end of the 21st century, 1 in 4 people will be above 65. And this is actually seen in all countries across the world, also in countries that are now currently kind of developing. And a part of this is because we live longer, but a part of it is also because we have dropping birth rates. So this is the birth per woman across the world, and we need a birth rate along this line to maintain population levels. So once we drop populations between or below 2.1, then the population will actually start to shrink. And there's countries around the world where the birth rates are really very, very low. And this is going to be a really large challenge for these countries because it will mean that the population will start to shrink. And so put it in a very simple way. So right now, there's about 1 in 10 in the person that's above 65. And by the end of the 21st century, it will be 1 in 3. So there's a huge difference in our demographics. And that is particularly challenging because the elderly population is much more prone to diseases. So this is the number of chronic diseases that people are diagnosed as we age, and as we can see that you get more and more diagnoses as we age, and there are very, very few people that are 65 and older that actually do not have some type of chronic disease. And so if we think of it in another way, so if you are really bad to yourself, if you smoke, if you drink alcohol, if you have a high BMI, if you're inactive, if you have a bad diet, you increase your risk of developing cancer by 76%. So this is a really significant amount, right? But if you age from being 10 to 60 years of age, basically just 50 years of time, you increase your risk of developing cancer in the following 30 years by 3,500%. So in a way, it's much more, it's much worse to grow old than it is to, for example, smoke. It's not to say that smoking is not bad, because if you smoke and do all these bad things while you're aging, you will increase your risk much more. So it will compound, and you increase your risk more than 6,000%. So something in the aging process really makes us very susceptible to disease. So what is aging? So there's actually no sort of real good agreement of what aging is. One way to define it is that it's a time-dependent increase in risk of death. This is a very sort of stringent way to define it. And it looks something like this. As we age, our risk of dying the following year actually follows an exponential curve. So when we're 30 years of age, and then every 8th year, our risk of dying doubles. So this is really quite significant. And so the red curve here is the risk of dying. The green curve here is the population. So how much, as the risk of death increases, the population will decline. So there'll be fewer individuals left at that age. And what's very interesting is that the risk of death is across many organisms has a very strong connection with this blue curve, which is actually fertility. So our fertility peaks around 25 years of age. We have time to get our kids out the door, basically, and then we're ready to fall over, said in a very rough way. So maybe our purpose is really to produce offspring. And this is our biological purpose, and this has been formulated in a theory that's called the disposable soma theory of aging, which really focuses on understanding the interaction between the soma, so our body, and then our germ cells. So this is our egg cells and our sperm cells that we can propagate to our children and are actually immortal. So our sperm cells and egg cells will become a child, and that child will generate new germ cells and so forth. And in the same way, we have received our cell line from our parents, that received them from their parents, and so forth, in an unbroken cell line all the way back to the beginning of life 3 billion years ago, in this unbroken cell line. So we actually have this immortal cell line within ourselves. And so aging occurs in almost all animals. In my lab, we look at humans, which have a maximum lifespan of 122 years. We also look at mice. We look a little bit at monkeys. We look at fruit flies, and sometimes we also look at zebrafish. And the difference between us and, for example, this organism here, which is a yeast cell, is the only difference really is our DNA sequence. So the way our 4 base pairs are put together in this long DNA strand dictates whether or not we're going to live 122 years or 13 days. There are other more extreme organisms. This is called the bristlecone pine, which you find in California. And that is actually more than 5,000 years old. And this is a sea sponge that lives at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean. And these sponges probably grew or emerged, were born, basically. They are animals. They were born when the ice retreated after the last ice age. So they're actually probably more than 10,000 years old. And if we look closer to where I'm situated here in Northern Europe, we have an organism called a hydra. It's actually found in many freshwater reservoirs and lakes and rivers across the world. And they have this risk of dying over time. So in essence, these organisms actually do not age. So the difference between us and this organism is basically our DNA, right? So something in our DNA must have a very important impact on our aging process. And we also know that because this is work that I've been focusing on a lot, is to understand diseases where you see accelerated aging. So these are diseases where children have inherited unfortunate genetic mutations from their parents, and then they grow old much faster. Another indication that of phenotypes that we see with age is something called senescent cells. These are cells that accumulate in our body, which are damaged cells that change morphology, and then they begin excreting inflammatory cytokines. So they make their microenvironment around them kind of inflammatory. I sometimes refer to them as angry old men because they have kind of lost their purpose in life. And they just sit around, they grow in size, and then they make their environment around them miserable. And it turns out that if you kill these angry old men in your tissues, then organisms appear to live longer. And so where does this damage come from that causes these phenotypes? So a lot of it comes from our metabolism. So this is actually a simplified schematic of our metabolism. It's very, very complex. There are thousands of metabolites that we have in each of our cells, and some of them very likely contribute to the aging process. A small contribution also comes from our environment. So it's probably an interaction between our genes, our internal metabolism, and our environment that drives the aging process. And so we know this also because this is a study that we did in Ethiopia where we looked at how altitude impacts lifespan. And we did this because at high altitudes, oxygen tensions are lower, and oxygen is a very reactive molecule that may contribute to some of this aging. And what was quite striking is that we see that life expectancy is increasing with elevation, and disease is actually decreasing with elevation. So it appears to be much better to live at high altitude. And in fact, if we look at cellular senescence using computational approaches, looking at blood samples, we can see that certain markers of cellular senescence, so these angry old men that we can measure in the blood, they actually appear to decrease. Conversely, we can see that people look older at high altitudes, probably because they're exposed more to UV radiation. So the one take-home message is that aging is not magic. Aging is influenced by our genes and the environment. And so I'm just going to give you a brief snapshot about a specific project where we've looked at molecules that target aging. And in this project, we are taking advantage of this sentence by Friedrich Nietzsche, which says, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." This is basically adaptation, right? If you can adapt to a stress, you become stronger from the stress. It's something we know in the aging field as the hormetic response. So if you damage cells, they survive, they can adapt, and they require more damage to be killed. We know this from, for example, cancer cells, where you also see this, which is unwanted, but we also see it in normal somatic cells. So we looked at molecules that might activate this hormetic response. We screened 13,000 or 15,000 molecules for their ability to stimulate DNA repair. We identified some of them, and then we tested them in fruit flies. So we have an algorithm that can recognize fruit flies, and then we can track them over time. We have a spin-out company called Track Bio, which is in the US. And so these are the tracks that the different fruit flies are doing over time. And when you are a young fruit fly, you walk quite a lot. And when you're an old fruit fly, you walk less. And this is quantified like this. So your mean distance decreases, your motor function actually decreases with age if you're a fruit fly. But that's actually also the case if you're a human. So motor function is a very strong marker of longevity and aging. And when we give this drug, we can completely reverse this, and we can extend lifespan in the fruit flies. And we recently tested this in a mouse model of Alzheimer's disease, where we can see that. So this is the red ones are mice that have Alzheimer's disease. The gray ones are mice that are normal. And this is a test where they learn over time to find at the exit of what's called a Barnes maze. So they become better and better at it. If you have Alzheimer's disease, you cannot remember where you're going, so the mice are not so good at it. But if we treat with this drug, we actually completely reverse this. This is really exciting, and we're trying to spin this out into a company. And here we're actually exploring the stress response for healthy aging. And so another point that I just want to make is that exercise is actually also one of these hormetic responses. It's a way that you also adapt to a stress. And exercise is really one of the best things you can do for your health and also for your brain. So if you exercise, you reduce your risk of developing Alzheimer's by about 30%. And you actually need the oxidative stress in your muscles to adapt to the exercise. So if you take antioxidants, you actually block the effect of the exercise. So antioxidants were long thought to be really beneficial for you, but this does not appear to be the case. We've known this in the aging field for 20 years, that antioxidants actually don't work. And you need this oxidative stress to have this response. And if you eat vitamin C and vitamin E, which are antioxidants, you block the hormetic response in your muscles. So aging is a biological process. You can stress, and then you can adapt, and that seems to be healthy. And I'm going to skip this real quick and jump to this here, which is an interesting study that was done almost 100 years ago, where Clive McKay looked at how diets impact aging. And so these two rats are actually the same age. The difference is that this age on the right has been given fewer calories than the one on the left, which has had as much calories as wanted to eat during its lifetime. And this type of caloric restriction has been shown to actually extend lifespan in most organisms where it's been tested. So here, this is data from Roy Walford showing that if you reduce the calorie intake from mice, then they live longer. It's actually also true for yeast, even yeast cells. If you reduce the amount of sugar that you give to the yeast, then they actually live longer. And this is work in monkeys, where you can also see the monkeys that are doing caloric restriction, they actually also live longer. And so recently it was shown that the effect of caloric restriction in mice is mediated in a large way by fasting. So in this experiment, they gave caloric restriction to mice. This is the purple line compared to the gray line, and you can see that it works a little bit. But if you give all of the food at once, that means that the mice eat everything at once, and then they are fasting about 20 hours per day. You can see a much greater increase. And so this seems to be very, so the fasting seems to be a strong mediator of this effect. And so we did a trial. This was actually in national TV in Denmark, where we treated individuals with different interventions, exercise, time-restricted eating, so fasting, and also something called NR, which increases NAD levels. And what we found was that fasting reduced body fat. It also reduced resting heart rate, and we saw that also with exercise. And for the oldest, we saw that that the fasting group, the individuals that were fasted, had a strong reduction in what we call the biological age. We also measured biological age using DNA methylation measurements, and here exercise seems to be a stronger effect than the others. And so one of the effects of fasting is to produce ketones. And a ketogenic diet increases lifespan in mice, and it actually improves the memory of mice. So this is a slide I usually show, and I ask questions. I ask individuals. So what are you going to choose? Are you going to choose the croissant, or are you going to choose, this is a kind of sugary pastry in Denmark, and I asked them, what are you going to choose for breakfast? And the correct answer is, of course, none of them, because you want to be skipping breakfast. It appears to be good for you. And you could drink dark coffee, which is actually one of the only kind of things that we ingest out of joy, and it actually seems to be healthy. So coffee reduces your risk of most chronic age-associated diseases. And you can also eat dark chocolate, but eat it after lunch when you can, so you don't break your fast. And remember to eat the chocolate with your friends, because a social life seems to be very important for aging. Actually, it can increase your life expectancy by about 4 years, and it reduces inflammation in the blood. It actually reduces blood pressure. So this is people that are not social, and this is maximum social people. So social life is really important. And this is a small list of things that you can consider to improve your health and your rate of aging. And thank you so much for your attention and the invitation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Well, thank you for a really insightful presentation and also a really inspiring one. To a little bit follow up on that, let's explore how this research of Dr. Morten impact us. For most of our audience, aging and longevity medicine can sound complex. What is one of the most accessible everyday impacts of your work that the public might not even realize come from the science of aging?
I mean, that's a great question. I think this the fasting, which at least in Denmark has really become like a huge thing. There's so many people that are fasting now. This really comes from these experiments in aging, and actually from almost 100 years ago, right, 1935, where these first caloric restriction trials were made, and then it took almost, I think, 75, 80 years or so before someone investigated what are some of the mechanisms that contribute to this, and then it turned out that fasting was very important, right? So I think fasting is one of the things that look quite interesting. One thing to consider, though, is that if you are an elderly individual, if you're considering fasting, you should you should remember to get enough protein, and you should remember to get enough exercise, because if you are fasting, there is a potential risk of losing muscle and bone mass. And we're investigating this now in a larger cohort trial for a longer period of time to see if we're actually impacting bone and muscle health. There's some studies that suggest that when you have this fasting period, that it may not be so much of a risk, but we have to make sure. So always remember also to do your exercise and get enough protein, particularly as we're aging.
Thank you for the answer. I think we have some question coming through the chat. What is your view on UPF and aging? From Kun Shini, Dr. Shini Pimlapas from DTU as well.
UPF, I don't know what UPF is.
I think it's, let me read the chat again.
Ultra processed foods.
Oh, ultra processed food.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so ultra processed food has been shown many times that it's really not healthy, right? So it increases your risk of a variety of diseases, and it's not so you should not eat ultra processed foods, basically. And this is so this is not good for you. So don't do that.
And another question is, could you recommend specific foods or products that are scientifically proven to help slowing down aging or support cellular health?
Yeah, so there's like some general categories. You need to get enough greens, so vegetables are very, very important. And reducing meat intake, red meat intakes is probably good for you, and also like processed meats, you need to reduce that. Then you should remember to eat fish, and then there are specific foods that may be good for you, and this could be nuts and maybe particular walnuts. There are certain fruits that contain molecules that are likely good for you, but we actually don't know completely in human trials. This is, for example, pomegranate that contains a molecule that gets converted into something called urolithin A, which is probably good, but we actually don't know in human trials. But in animal models, that seems to be very beneficial. Then there is strawberries, which contain something called fisetin, which is probably also good for you. And another thing is cheeses. Hard cheeses seems to be quite good for you. They contain a variety of different compounds. Also, this I didn't have time to talk about this, but an NAD precursor called nicotinamide riboside is found in cow's milk, and it's therefore also in cheese. Milk in general is actually not so healthy for you. It's quite high in calories. It's as many calories. There's as many calories in cow's milk as there is in Coca-Cola. So that's probably not healthy. Yogurt seems to be quite healthy, and low-fat yogurt seems to be healthier than high-fat yogurt. Sugar in general you should avoid. Sugar is really bad for you. What am I missing? Chocolate. Blueberries may be good. They also contain different molecules. There's a lot of talk about, these antioxidant fruits, but there's no evidence suggesting that it's antioxidants and blueberries that are healthy for you. They also contain antioxidants, but they contain thousands of other molecules. And in fact, I was at a meeting in Hungary maybe a month ago where a speaker there was discussing the amount of molecules that are actually in our food. Okay, so right now we have maybe 200-300 molecules that we have well characterized in our food sources, but when we eat, we get more than 100,000 different molecules. So there's a huge amount of stuff that we eat that we actually have no idea what they're doing. So this is something that researchers are now focusing on.
Thank you for that. And another question, I think this question is very interesting and hopefully very appear to be useful also for Thailand. How can public health system better support individuals in achieving lifelong well-being? Any example from Denmark?
I mean, this is really a difficult question. It's a great question and it's a super important question. And it's, a very relevant question for all societies across the world. And it really is about having a way to motivate people to change their behavior, right? And you actually have a really large amount of you can change health really a lot through this. Okay, so diet, for example, if you have the worst diet group versus the best diet group, this can be a 10-year difference in their lifespan. If you have people that are smoking versus non-smokers, that's about 7 years. If you do exercise versus non-exercise, that's another 7 years, right? So if you combine all of that, then if you are really bad to yourself, maybe you're taking out 20 years of your life, basically, and that's just behavior, right? So I think these are by far the lowest hanging fruits. So educating the public about this, campaigns about these very simple interventions that appear to be very effective. And as a government, if you're a government, you can modify people's behavior in many ways, right? So in Denmark, we have taxed tobacco very highly, and that reduces tobacco intake, which is good for overall health. But it's a question, right? Every time you do something like that, you're impacting people's freedom. But I don't think the world is better with tobacco. So I think taxing with more is probably good. I used to smoke when I was younger, but I mean it's really bad for you, yeah, so I think these are some of the things, right? Educating, you can do policies that impact people's behavior, and also educating people to let them know that it's never too late, right? There's always actually a benefit to start doing these things.
Another question from our Thailand team. I mean, you just visited Thailand for a collaboration trip. What stood out to you the most about the Thai approach to public health and aging?
Come again? What stood
You
out?
you recently visit Thailand.
Yeah.
What stood out to you about the Thai approach to public health and aging?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, it's also a very difficult question. I think, in a very sort of closed habitat, but I think one thing that I think that Thai food in general is actually very healthy. I think that there's some things that could be modified, and I think what I saw was I think that it's moving in the right direction, but maybe more policy and educating individuals, and then there are definitely some challenges in Thailand, right? That in Denmark, for example, we have people bike everywhere, right? You jump on the bicycle and then you bike everywhere. But in Thailand, it's so hot, right, that you would be immediately sweaty when you are biking around Bangkok. So this is definitely a challenge. So some way of being able to introduce exercise would probably also be a good thing, but that's really very challenging. But in general, I felt that particularly the food seems to be an area where Thailand is doing well.
Well, thank you for that, and we can confirm that Thai food is good, not just the taste, but also in the variety of things. Yeah. And one last question. If you could give one science-based tip to someone in their 30s or 40 who want to age well, something beyond the usual sleep and exercise, what would it be?
I mean, I think skipping breakfast is probably going to be healthy. So I would suggest skipping breakfast and then, and maybe become a vegetarian. This seems to be healthy also.
Well, that's very interesting coming from someone from Denmark, where we have pigs more than people who live in Denmark. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of pigs here. Yeah, too many.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Morten. If anyone have more questions, please type in the chat or please raise your hands. If not, then we have a question for both of you in terms of about what is the biggest challenge in translating information? I mean, also Dr. Alberto, if you're still here, what is the biggest challenge in translating information from the research bent to the industry? Shout out to the researcher who joined us today here. This question is coming from them.
It's a very good question. Actually, what's the most
challenge in
important?
translating information from the research to industry that come to both of your minds?
For sure. Yeah. I want to go ahead.
I mean, it's I think as an academic, you are often focusing on very specific molecular changes, and having that translated into something that's useful for societies is sometimes very difficult. I think the idea is that on the long term, you'll find something that is probably beneficial, right? But so that's a big challenge, I think, the translation of basic science. But I think it's definitely necessary.
Thank you for that. And another following up question, this will be the last question for today. If we were to launch, for example, a pilot project bridging expertise from both region in either longevity or biotechnology, what would be your ideal scope or focus that project to demonstrate tangible impact within, let's say, 18 or 24 months?
That's very challenging. I think for me, if we're running clinical trials, there's always going to be a lag period. it takes time to get ethical approval and takes time to run trials. But I think this would, for me, by far be the most interesting thing if we can run trials that occur in Denmark and in Thailand at the same time, because societies are very different, right? In particular, we are eating very different things. So if something, but we also, all of us age, right? So if we have something that works in both Denmark and Thailand, then it's probably something that works most places around the world. So I think that would, for me, be very interesting if we could do something like that. But it will definitely be challenging to get the results within 2 years.
From our side in biotechnological production, I think we have less restrictions, although there are still many regulatory bodies that need to approve big scale productions and so on. I think what would be very interesting would be to develop a proof of concept of a process that can be fully integrated between two countries that are physically quite far away. So, for example, proving successful tech transfer so that the technology that is developed here can be reproduced with high fidelity in another facility with the cultural and language barriers as well, and also show that there is a competitive advantage in collaborating, right? In having splitting the efficiency between different countries that have different specialities. So I think it would be very interesting if we would have to have a proof of concept project where you can at the end prove that the collaboration is actually technical and economical advantage over having each country developing their own productions and their technology.
Well, thank you for the answer, and thank you both for your insightful, for sharing your incredible expertise and work with us today. And also a huge thank to our active audience for your engaging questions. TNIU is committed in fostering this connection and translating discussion into tangible impact. If you are interested in pursuing collaboration, knowledge exchange, or partnership we discussed today, please don't hesitate to reach out to TNIU team or to Dr. Vato or Dr. Morten. We are here to help facilitate those next steps. And we hope today's session spark new ideas, collaboration, and maybe even new coffee conversation of your own. So thank you today. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the